In this little exercise series, we're going to be modeling and texturing this simple island scene that you see right here. So in this first video, we're going to be taking a look at modeling the island itself and the water around it. So let's get started in Blender. The first thing that we want to do to create the island is to have sort of a half sphere to get that round shape. But there's a problem if we add an actual sphere. See, if we do that, and then we add a subdivision surface modifier, we're going to get a lot of stretching right inside of here when we use displacement. And so it's not going to end up looking very good. So what we can do instead is, instead of using a sphere, we can go to Mesh and Round Cube and just choose Sphere. And that way we're going to get the same result as if we had subdivided a cube. And then we can go into edit mode. From side view, we can select the bottom vertices, delete those, scale it up, and then scale it down on the z-axis so we have that nice round shape. Now we can take this bottom edge loop by alt selecting it, extruding it down on the z-axis, and then just scaling it up. And I'm going to extrude and scale one more time, and this is going to be the bottom of the sea floor. And we can move this up or down if we need to, but that'll just give us a good place to start out. So I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier to this, and that's going to help smooth everything out. But of course it's not going to be completely flat ground. When you look at a picture of an island, usually there's some bumps in the sand, holes, things like that. Usually it's not going to be completely flat. So what I can do is actually add a displacement modifier, and right now that's only moving it completely up. However, if I press new, it's going to add a new texture. So if I go to, let's see, right now I'm not seeing the textured panel, so I'm going to go to Blender Render Temporarily. And then switch to the texture panel. For some reason it wasn't showing up in cycles, so then I can just switch back into cycles, and here we have the displaced texture right here. So that may happen when you're working with it. Usually it shows up, but in this case it didn't. So right now it's just a blank image removie, so that it's moving it completely down since it's just a black image. However, I can change this to clouds, and as you can see, this is distorting the mesh in the shape of that texture. So now I can go back to my modifier and increase the amount of subdivisions, and since we have the subdivision surface above the displacement modifier, the higher that we set this, the higher resolution this is going to be. Now of course right now it's super sharp, so let's lower the strength to about 0.1. And I can set this to smooth shading by pressing Z if you're using the Pi menu add-on. Otherwise you can get that in the toolbar right down here under shading. So that's looking pretty good so far, and we can adjust that a little bit later if we need to. Now let's go ahead and add the water so we know exactly where that needs to be. For that, I'm just going to add a simple plane and then scale that up. Now we're going to use the ocean modifier. So let's just go to Add Modifier and Ocean, and then we're going to have this really big ocean. So maybe I need to scale that bit down, let's say about there. But of course it is really, really big. So let's increase the resolution first of all so we can see exactly what we're working with. I'll increase it to 20 to start out. And these waves look absolutely huge compared to our little island there. So to get things in a more proportional relation to each other, I'm going to increase the spatial size, say to 200, but then I'm going to need to scale that back down, and now we have a more realistic result. So here we have our ocean, and we can position this where it needs to be depending on how we want our camera to be viewed. So if I press 0 on the number pad, it's going to take me into the camera view, and now when I right click to select this camera, I can press G and move it around, or press Shift F and use the fly menu or the fly mode to kind of orbit around there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press G and then middle mouse click, and that's going to allow me to pull directly back. And I'm going to position this just to where we are at the edge of the water and looking at that island. I want the island to fill up most of the view, but not quite all of it. And I'd say that's looking pretty good. So now what we're going to do is, since we know exactly where the water is and where that ends compared to the camera, we can take this ocean modifier and I can Shift D to duplicate it along the y-axis, and I'm just going to scale that up. I don't really need to increase the resolution. Since it's going to be farther away, we're not going to notice the lesser detail. So as we just view through here, it just looks like an extension of our ocean. Now I might want to pull this down just a little bit in case there's a little bit of overlap, so we don't want the seams showing. So just like that. And I'll take this one and one more time, Shift D to duplicate it along the y-axis and scale that up to be much larger. And this way we can save on memory without having to make a massive ocean with high-res detail. We can just put the detail exactly where we need it to be. So now we have a nice big ocean with our island right here. And right now it looks a little bit too uniform. So I'm just simply going to go into edit mode and turn on proportional editing down here. And I'm going to drag on some of these while increasing the scroll wheel. And I can edit the island just like so. Alright, so that's the basics of how we're going to model the island and the water. In the next video, we're going to be looking at how to set up the shaders and textures for each of them.